This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Okay, well, thank you, Sophie, and thanks, Carl, and thanks, Richard, as well, for I think, getting to this particular event has been a long process, from the Naqab to here to Jerusalem. But, my role in this project as running the different aspects in Rahab of our history, it comes from my background as someone who studied the oral history probably for the first time, and listening to the Chinese stories, and also bringing new dynamics about the importance of oral history and writing about the Naqab community is something unique, something enlightening our knowledge about the past, and this is what I hopefully will be seeing light as soon as possible with Columbia University Press, my upcoming book, and also Sophie mentioned the other book that we co-authored with Richard, and the Naqab Bedouin colonialism and new perspectives, and we're hoping also to see another production as an outcome of this particular project. So my background basically goes back to Exeter University, and working on this topic and bringing it up to date to the current dynamics. And I'm really happy to see new faces from the Naqab finally coming to London, also to bring this situation to the international community, international organizations, which has been, I think, a very enriching experience. So what we're going to do in the first panel, inviting Ahmad and Sana for first panel, which will basically discuss the grassroots and international legal struggle. And both Ahmad and Sana will speak about different dynamics. So Ahmad will start on the history, and so he will provide us with the significant background about Ottoman British history. What are the Naqab Bedouin community, Palestinian indigenous Arabs located in the south and the Beersheba region that are kind of marginalized, and we're bringing them to up to date with the other Palestinian scholarship, as Sophie mentioned. So Ahmed will talk about the history, and then we will move to Sana, that will also bring us to up to date the current situation, the current struggle, and the legal aspects of the struggle. So Ahmad Amara is a PhD candidate at New York University, and he's also a human rights lawyer. His research focused on the Ottoman land law and reform in southern Palestine from the 1850s. Ahmed also co-authored the book Indigenous Injustice, and it's just been published a few years ago with Ismail Saad and Oren Yiftakher. So Ahmed will provide us with a rich historical background to set the scenes for the event, and then Sana will follow up.
Okay, thank you, Mansour. I'm going to sometimes stand and sit. I can't sit still. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I was excited to see the minority rights group, because I remember when I worked at Harvard, the human rights program at Harvard for 3 years, and began an international advocacy project on the Naqab. I was looking for material and human rights work and project and reports, and the minority rights group report from the 80s, when nobody actually thought, in the last decade almost, the issue of the Naqab and the Bedouin attracting much human rights advocacy work, field work, scholarship, which is developing and contributing very much to our understanding, and it's really making further and further steps in how to read the dynamics, the history, to understand the structures of discrimination or the history, etc., etc. And the minority rights group was really pioneering in this regard. So now I'm doing PhD on the land law of the Ottoman Empire and the British colonial law in Palestine, in southern Palestine in particular, and I'm going to just give an overview with snapshots really quickly to set, the scene for the context of this discussion. But it's mostly material from the Ottoman archives in Istanbul, and some from the National Archives in London, and the Israel State Archives, and personal papers, which is really important, I think, to look into this continuity over time from the Ottoman period. So just to go fast, that's 1948, which is always the beginning temporal time. But before we go there, this is roughly a map of most of the Bedouin confederations that lived in southern Palestine for at least since the 7th century. And this is more or less, as with many maps that has to draw lines, that the space was more dynamic and separations are not as neat. But we had about 7 to 80,000 people by 1899 or 1900 living in southern Palestine. It is important to think of the community not as Bedouin autonomous group that lived outside the government system or outside the state. They were not in an extra space that lied beyond the reach of the government. They indeed were largely governed, but these connections, mostly through intermediaries, as it was distinctive for early imperial governments, happened for centuries. And we know about facts of taxation of agricultural products in the area of the Negev from the 16th century. And this is important not only for telling us about this connection between the Ottoman center and the periphery, if we wish, but more about the agricultural activity of the Bedouin, which we tend very much to imagine Bedouin as nomads wandering in the desert. And here you have massive, widespread agricultural activity that increased over time, reaching about 3 to 4 million dunams by 1948, 3 to 4 million dunams of agriculture. Which tells us even more about the communal networks, because if you have agriculture, you will have people to work in this agriculture. You have to market your products, and sometimes you need money for that, and you export and you import, etc. So it's important to read these broader networks and intercommunal between Gaza and the north and the Bedouin and Sinai and the Naqab. So all of these networks, I think, very important. And here, if we look at the figures by the First World War, 60,000 tons of barley were exported from Gaza, through Gaza, which was mostly Bedouin-grown agriculture and barley, which constituted also 70% of the barley of Palestine. I think these are important figures also to understand the property system that emerged with regards to land. In 1900, the Ottoman were looking forward to establish more permanent and new modes of governance. So they built the city of Beersheba, the modern city of Beersheba in 1900, and also the new sub-district administrative center. Now, Beersheba was also the first town to be occupied by the British in Palestine in 1917, in October, and from there moving southwards. Still, the administrative divisions continued under the British with the Beersheba sub-district, and the ways of governance more or less remained the same, giving relative autonomy, applying the formal law administratively and legally with regards to property rights, with a little more adapted and adjusted way to the local conditions. Whereas the British began a large-scale land title registration since 1928 in Palestine, they haven't really reached the Negev in a state-initiated, organized way to register the rights. So by 1948, the land was not registered They managed only to do for about 20% of Palestine, of the land registration, but there still was people who individually went and registered formally with the state their land rights. And this is one example here. And before, when we looked, this was an Ottoman land registration. Something also that, we think the Bedouin oral system of property administration, which is quite not true. There are like unofficial documents between the community that were out there, and then state-sanctioned registration. Now in 1948, sorry, I keep jumping, 1948, it's really like the big social, cultural rupture and destruction to the society that happened. Because we're talking about the 80 or 90,000 people who lived in southern Palestine, and we remained only with about 13,000. And it's important to bring the Beersheba case, the Naqab case, also in the broader context of the Israelis' land disposition, the connection of Judaization of the space with the demographic and geographic engineering, if you wish, to Palestine that happened since 1948 until now. Now, if we look at this is more or less the rough map of what is the Naqab considered today within the Israeli borders, and this is the Siyaj area. So in most of this area, where the 90,000 Bedouin have lived, mostly were expelled to Gaza, the West Bank, Jordan, and the Sinai. And we remained with about 11 to 13, the statistics are different, thousand. Many of them lived in the really rich cultivable land in the western Negev and the northern, but the decision was to push and concentrate everybody in a security-driven area that was demarcated by security considerations, and everybody was concentrated here by the early 1950s. Until 1966, all the Bedouin lived only in this area, and they were subjected to military rule until 1966. Now, at this time, there were three major policy options that were brought before the state. Gurion and Dayan and others. So one option was to expel the remaining Bedouins just outside the country and have a clean Negev. The second was to build 3 settlements, modern settlements, and to urbanize all the Bedouin into these 3 settlements. And the third option was just to bring everybody further north and settle them in neighborhoods in the mixed cities of Lid, Ramli, and Jaffa. Actually, to some extent, the 3 options worked at the same time, because the expulsion of Bedouin continued until the mid-50s from the borders of Israel. But the overall dominant option was really the first urbanization, the settlements, which we will talk now about. But then today you have also, in the towns of Lid and Ramli, you do have neighborhoods also of Bedouins originally from the Negev living there. With the remaining 6 minutes, we'll start to jump a little bit. So this is how, today we have 7 townships, right? And before that, today we have about 240,000. That's like, don't, hold us on the numbers, because we don't know the exact statistics because of the informality and unofficial spatial arrangements over there. Because you have legal, quote-unquote, settlements, you have illegal, informal settlements, that it's hard to count the people. So about half, let's say, living in 7 townships, the other half live in the villages that they were originally brought to, into this Sayag area. So people were asked by the army, just stay here in this area, and mostly on lands of original Bedouin refugees. This is how more or less the townships look like. This is the unrecognized villages. I guess Sana will talk more about the conditions there. But I want to use those last 5 minutes on the land question. The land questions lies at the heart of what is going on now. It's the main axe that defines the relationships now with the Israeli government and has serious implications on the conditions of the people. So in 1970, Israel decided, Israel continued since 1948 with the British-initiated land title registration. We come to an area, ask the people to file their claims to the land. There is a process to figure out who owns what, you define the borders, and you register the land. Now, in Beersheba, only in 1970, they decided to begin a formal land title settlement process. And here we have the numbers of, the numbers of the claims in figures. So more than 3,000 land claims people filed, over about 1.5 million dunams. 500,000 was of pasture land, so the state didn't consider this as to be a legitimate request even for a land. Anyway, nowadays we talk about, like originally at that time, what we mean about 900,000. You use dunams here, or in Britain, what do you, acres? Acres. So 4 dunams are about 1 acre. So like divide by 4. What's interesting actually, by the 3,220 claims, you almost have a neat puzzle, almost. This is the map of the claims, and they really fit. People knew the borders. Sometimes they were registered and they fit really neatly in a puzzle. There's still some little overlaps or contradictions, conflicts between the claims. Now, here comes the interesting story, okay, with the Ottoman. This is Ottoman. This is Ottoman land law from 1858. This is Article 6 with a very bad translation, official translation from 1890. Of what's Article 6? Now let's begin with the the end to now. Israel says the land that the Bedouin are claiming is Mawat land. It's dead land. Okay, and thus it is a state land. What is Mawat land? It's an Ottoman land category that continue. The British maintained the Ottoman law with little amendments, and then Israel, when it came, it inherited both the legal regime. So in a way, the Ottoman, the British, and the Israeli law continued until now. I'm a lawyer also in profession, so if I go to the court, in land cases, I have to advocate this. Okay. This is like 3 lines Ottoman language article that really dispossessing, actually not only in the Naqab, because many settlements in the West Bank are also expropriated under the same legal argument. Now, Mawat land says it's any land that lies beyond the loud voice of someone, or a 30-minute walk, or an estimate of 1.5 miles from the outskirts of a settlement or inhabited area. We'll not go to the details, but what Israel comes and says with really smart legal consultants, advisors, they say, look, in the Naqab, we don't have settlements. We have Bedouin encampments. They don't count. These are not villages or settlements. And even if you have a modern settlement like Beersheba or others, it should have existed in 1858. Not even like 1900, 1910, 1890s, etc. And the law, the other thing they say, of course, Bedouin are nomads, never cultivated the land, and under the Ottoman, cultivation was the main source of legal title to the land. Here the British piece comes in. In 1921, the British changed the Ottoman law. Under the Ottoman, this dead land, if you revive it, if you bring it into cultivation, okay, take it in more simple terms, you take it, because the Ottoman wanted more cultivation, it means more taxes. The British can say, hey, wait, no. Under the Ottoman, even if you do that without the permit of the government, the British say, wait, you come to Mawat land, you have to ask for a permit if you want to cultivate it. And if you do that without permit, you will be a trespasser and be prosecuted. you have to get a permit before you do that. And it gave 2 months to, have 1 minute, gave 2 months to, 2 months to register for anyone who claims rights to the land. So the Israeli court said, oh wait, okay, you claim you cultivated the land, I'm sorry, you had the 2 months in 1921 and you missed your chance. And thus you are trespassers, everybody's illegally present on these lands. Of course, we will not go to argue now of why and how, but I had here a map that shows, just to finish with this, only that the Jewish National Fund and other Jewish organizations and other Zionist individuals, they purchased land from the Bedouin before 1948, about 100,000 dunams. And we know that tax papers, tax payments as a source of legal, even not to think again about the Bedouin as customary borrow that existed alone, was very much integrated in different forms with the state. Now, all the 3,000 claims, the state decided not to decide on them. Seriously, until now. From the 1970s, the state appointed a committee that said, let's negotiate and compensate the Bedouin of 10% of their land claims, roughly speaking. And this continued until now. Only from a few years ago, the state began to bring these claims from the 70s to the court, what's called counterclaim then. And they have been winning all cases that they have brought, about 500 in number. So 100% winning rate in court. None, even one single land case was won by the Bedouin. And I'll leave it here for Sana to take it from here.
Thank you, Ahmed.